Losing in poker is not about running bad. It's about bad pre-flop decisions. Players who win consistently build their edge before the flop and they collect all the profits. Hi, I'm Sky, author of Preflop Online Poker, and I want to see you succeed. In this audiobook, I'm giving you the exact foundation winning players rely on every single day. This is part 4 of the audiobook where we talk about blind play. Links to parts 1, 2, and 3 in the description below. Let's build your preflop edge so you can profit forever. Gambate! The fourth domino, blind play. The first 3 dominoes each involve the blinds in some fashion. In the first domino, I discussed ranges to open, call, and 3-bet from the blinds. In the second domino, I covered the importance of stealing more than your share of preflop pots from the 2 blinds. The third domino discussed 3-bets, and a part of that was defending your blinds with either 3-bets for value or as re-steals. But there's still so much to discuss surrounding the difficulties faced in the blinds. At 6 max tables, you're in the blinds a whopping 33% of the time, and 22% in full ring games. From the blinds, you're out of position against the rest of the table, and they are automatic losing positions in the long run. This is true for 3 reasons. Reason 1, you're forced to put in chips without looking at the strength of your cards. Reason 2, you face a lot of aggression from late position stealers and small blind stealers when you're in the big blind. And reason 3, you're mostly out of position post-flop. Due to these reasons, blind play ends up being a huge leak for many players. We must therefore work to minimize these losses by making positive EV decisions out of the blinds. Subdomino 4.1, Defending the Blinds. In the long run, everyone loses money in the blinds. It's something you can't avoid. You can't even sidestep these losses by folding every hand in the blinds. If you folded every big blind hand, you would have a negative 100 big blinds per 100 hands win rate in the big blind. If you folded every small blind, your win rate in the small blind would be negative 50 big blinds per 100 hands. Combine these and folding every blind dealt to you would yield a total loss of negative 75 big blinds per 100 hands in the blinds. That's a difficult amount to overcome, even with expert level play in every other position. We must work to minimize these losses. By playing well and making positive EV decisions out of the blinds, good winning cash game players can attain a win rate of negative 40 big blinds per 100 hands or better in the big blind, and negative 20 big blinds per 100 hands or better in the small blind. This is a 60% savings over folding every blind hand, which is like saying you pay your blinds only 40% of the time. In poker, a penny saved is a penny earned, so any improvement you can make in the blinds goes directly to your bottom line. I ran through my database and searched for the different opportunities I had in the blinds. Out of the recent 64,566 hands I played, I was dealt 23,808 hands in the blinds. That's 37% of the time. It seems high, but if 6 max tables aren't full, you're in the blinds more frequently than 33% of the time. Here's what I found. In the blinds, 58% of the time I faced a 2-bet. That was 13,708 hands. 18% of the time, I had the opportunity to raise over limpers, 4,386 hands. 13% of the time, it was folded to me in the small blind and I had the opportunity to open the pot, 3,166 hands. And 6% of the time, I had the opportunity to 4-bet, which means I was facing a 3-bet, 1,393 hands. Your database is going to look a lot like mine, where the most frequent action you face is a 2-bet. This subdomino will cover in detail how to approach this ubiquitous situation. An eye-opening exercise. Do you know the difference in your own profitability when calling versus raising out of the blinds? Calling gives you 0 fold equity, as you're relying on hitting your hand, winning at showdown, or potentially finding an opportunity to bluff later on. You've also capped your range by calling, meaning you don't have everyone's favorite hands, pocket queens, kings, aces, or even ace-king, unless you occasionally call with these to trick your opponents. You must know what you're getting into when calling in the blinds, playing a hand out of position with the capped range. These 2 things are the antithesis of bread and butter situations, and even worse, you're giving that to your opponent. Your win rate when calling is likely going to be much lower than when raising in the blinds. Take a look at Figure 101 on the Images page. It's a blank chart that you're going to fill out to help you figure out your profitability in 3 common situations. The first situation is just your total blind play. You're going to record the number of hands, the dollars in profit or loss, the dollar you made or lost per hand, and your win rate. Next, you'll record those 4 same numbers for any call pre-flop, and then you'll record those same 4 numbers for any raise pre-flop. Here are the filters you're going to use. For the first situation, total blind play. You want to separate your blind hands from all the other positions. In PokerTracker 4, and Hold'em Manager 2 is similar to this, turn on the posted small blind and posted big blind filters within the pre-flop actions and opportunities section. Record the number of hands played, the dollars in profit or loss, the dollars per hand played, and the total win rate. The second filter, you're going to add called 2-bet under the Preflop Calls sub-menu within the Preflop Actions and Opportunities section. Record the numbers again. And the final third filter, replace the called 2-bet filter with any raise under the Preflop Raises sub-menu within the Preflop Actions and Opportunities section. Record this final set of numbers. If you folded every blind, your total win rate would be negative 75 big blinds per 100 hands. Are your win rates worse or better than this? Do you see any clear patterns emerge? What can you take away from these numbers? The next figure on the Images page, number 102, is filled out with information from one of my students with a database of 176,411 hands. My student follows the pattern that most poker players follow, losing in total out of the blinds with the negative 45 big blinds per 100 hands win rate. Now, this is better than just folding every blind hand dealt. The next, my student is losing when calling in the blinds. The win rate here is negative 92 big blinds per 100 hands. My student is doing worse when calling than if they would have just folded every hand. And the third situation, my student is winning when raising in the blinds, with a positive 64 big blinds per 100 hands. Fill out this table for yourself and see if your stats follow this student's pattern. You don't have to defend your blinds. Too many players see the blinds as their money and feel the need to defend them. You're not taking my blinds without a fight! Once money is in the pot, it's no longer yours. Folding with money already contributed to the pot is a neutral EV play. It's your job as a good poker player to make positive EV decisions. Defend your blinds with calls and 3-bets when it's positive EV to do so. Don't defend just to defend and end up throwing good money after bad. Here's a novel idea. Instead of defending with that money, save it for a later attack. And I know that you know you're profitable when attacking. Just look back at your numbers from Figure 101 from the chart that you just filled out. If you call a 3.5 big blind open raise from the small blind with Queen 8 suited, it's going to cost you 3 big blinds. Sure, Queen 8 suited can make straights and flushes, but you're putting yourself out of position on the flop and on the defensive. That's anti-bread and butter. You're better off folding, and the next time you're dealt Queen 8 suited in the middle position, cutoff, or button, put those chips to great use and open raise. Be a good general and commit your resources for the most benefit. Facing a 2-bet options. By now you've had plenty of practice with the kiss ranges out of the blinds, and you possibly have them committed to memory. Following the ranges exactly will keep you within the tag spectrum in the blinds, but sometimes you'll want to stray outside of the ranges. When it's your turn to act, you have 3 options: fold, call, or raise. Before folding, you know that hands like 8 deuce offsuit, 9 6 offsuit, and Jack 4 offsuit are not worth playing, and you're probably clicking the auto fold button ahead of time. But great players in the blinds are always in a stealing mindset. Can I profitably 3-bet steal? To answer this question, we need to consider our opponent and their tendencies. Depending on the situation, we'll look at their limp then fold, raise then fold, and fold to 3-bet stats. The more you look at these, the more often you'll find spots where you can profitably 3-bet steal. Of course, you run the risk of them calling or re-raising, but that comes with having a stealing mindset. Before calling, don't let the math fool you. You may be tempted to call when your opponents offer great calling odds. Here's an example scenario. Playing Jack 4 offsuit in the big blind. The under-the-gun villain min opens to 2 big blinds. 4 players, from the MP to the small blind called. Hero is in the big blind with Jack 4 offsuit. It only costs 1 big blind to win the total pot of 12 big blinds. What's Hero's play? Fold, call, or raise? Fold. It costs Hero 1 big blind to win 12 big blinds. This means Hero only needs 8.33% pre-flop equity to make a break-even call. What equity does Jack 4 offsuit have versus 5 other ranges? Take a look at figure 103. You can see that Jack 4 offsuit versus these 5 ranges only has 10.3% pre-flop equity. It has enough pre-flop equity to make a slightly profitable call, but is it truly worth playing? Consider the situation Hero is voluntarily entering. It's a 6-way pot, out of position, against 4 players. Hero has a capped range. Hero has a hand that can't be played confidently unless it has trips or better by the turn. Even 2-pair must be played cautiously. And Jack 4 offsuit flops 2-pair or greater, or an open-ended straight draw or greater, only 6% of the time. This means that 94% of flops will find Hero check folding. Don't defend your blinds just because the price is right, and for the off chance you'll hit miracle quads on the flop. Stay tight, especially when calling multi-way pots, because you must hit the flop hard to make any money. And even when you do, it's difficult to get paid off because players often give credit to aggressive plays in multi-way pots, and they're quick to fold marginal hands and draws. Versus an open raise. Know what you're getting yourself into before calling an opponent's open raise. Determine the EV nature of calling by asking yourself questions like, is this a profitable calling opportunity? Is 3-betting a more positive EV play? How does my hand play against villain's open raising range? By calling here, am I going to face difficult post-flop decisions? Versus early position raises. For the most part, early position open raises are tight and strong ranges, so we must not call often against them. Plus, it's likely we'll face post-flop c-bets from these tighter ranges. Calling out of position versus strong ranges is not bread and butter. That's why the KISS ranges have you calling a small range of hands versus EP open raises. Calling preflop in the blinds gives your opponent positional and range advantages, so you'd better have a good reason to do so. You can call small to medium pocket pairs for set mining as long as you've got 20x stacks behind. Remember the 20x rule from Subdomino 1.3. If you are set mining, don't allow yourself to get suckered into check calling down the streets with second or third pair or a weak draw in the off chance your opponent is bluffing. The goal is to flop a set, and if you don't flop it, highly consider check folding versus your in-position, stronger ranged opponent. Versus steals. Your calling range is widest versus cutoff, button, and small blind steals. Make the most of your calls in the blinds versus aggressive stealers by calling with hands toward the top of your opponent's opening range. When your hand is at the top of their range, you swing the equities in your favor, even though your opponent may have position and you've capped your range. Figure 104 shows the preflop equity of calling ace-queen versus an ace-x open raising range. Ace-queen has 67% versus a range of every suited and every offsuit ace. The ace-queen hand dominates most aces they opened with, as well as all other broadways, kings, queens, suited connectors, and suited gappers. 3-betting is an option with this hand, but keeping in all the dominated hands will allow you to gain maximum value on ace-high and queen-high flops. If you called with the hand in the middle of villain's opening range, say ace-7, the preflop equity drops significantly. Figure 105 shows against that same all aces range, ace-7 only has 45% equity. You've gone from a 67% preflop equity favorite to a 45% preflop equity dog. Pair this fact with a capped range and a positional disadvantage, and you are far removed from the bread and butter situation you're always looking to play. Open limping in the small blind. In cash games, don't open limp in the small blind when it's folded around to you. When you limp, the big blind often raises over your display of weakness, making you pay more to see the flop. If your hand is worth playing, then raise. Otherwise, fold. Here is the small blind motto: raise first in or fold, don't open limp. Multi-way limped pots. Sometimes it's limped to us by one or more players. We have the option of over-limping in the small blind, or checking our big blind, or we can come over the top with a raise. The more limpers in the hand, the more careful you need to be. If you call or check, You're knowingly going post-flop without position against multiple opponents. If you raise and one opponent calls, this often creates a cascade of calls from any weak passive limper still in the hand. Think about the situation and ask yourself, how can I make money here? In the small blind, if you're dealt absolute junk like Jack-4 offsuit or 5-3 offsuit, don't make the call no matter the odds you're being offered. Don't let the math fool you. Save the 0.5 big blinds and move on to the next hand. If it's limp to your big blind, the decision is a bit easier. Check behind your junk and only raise value hands. Either way, if you get to the flop in a multi-way pot with a weaker holding, play straightforward and err on the side of value, not bluffy post-flop play. I'll cover raising over limpers below. Before raising. Before you make any 3-bet, know if you're doing so for value or as a bluff. The kiss ranges help you with this, but know your opponent and plan your 3-bet accordingly. If you're ever surprised by your opponent's call or 4-bet, then you didn't think through your 3-bet enough. First, value 3-bets. When we're value 3-betting, we must be reasonably sure they can continue with worse hands. Size your blind 3-bet somewhere over 3x for both value and bluffs. I generally make it between 10 to 12 big blinds. If your opponent is a loose aggressive or maniac and capable of 4-betting light, you can try sizing it smaller to induce this. You can then 5-bet or time down and call to lull them into thinking you've got a weaker hand. If you're not sure if your pocket jacks or ace-king is a value hand against an opponent, then you can flat instead and take the action to the flop. Be sensible and capable of ditching the hand if necessary. It's alright to call with pocket kings and pocket aces, especially if you think the opponent won't continue with worse. If they will fold all worse pairs and ace-x hands to your 3-bet, then don't make the 3-bet. Call and go post-flop with your superior hand. This has the added benefit of strengthening your calling range. If you're capable of showing up with kings or aces after calling pre-flop, your opponents will have a harder time putting you on a hand. Next, bluff 3-bets. When bluffing, your goal is for the opponent to fold and award you the pot. The kiss 3-bet bluffing ranges are necessarily small. You're out of position, and your 3-bets must contain a greater ratio of value to bluffs. Stick to these ranges for your bluffs, unless you deem it positive EV to 3-bet bluff against this opponent in this spot right now. What information will help you spot good 3-bet bluffing opportunities? Villain has a high attempt to steal stat, or a high raise first in that position. Also, a high fold versus 3-bet steal, over 75% is great, and beware if it's less than 60%. Look for opponents to exploit and be careful when tackling good tight aggressive and loose aggressive regs. These players know what you might be up to, and can call with position and a wide range with the plan of taking it away later. If you are straying outside of the kiss ranges, blockers are always good as they make it more likely the opponent will fold. But if they fold a ton, like 80% or greater, then you can re-steal with a very wide range. If their fold percentage is lower, blockers add equity to your 3-bet bluff. Suited connectors are still great options due to their high post-flop playability. If they never fold, don't bluff. This is a key concept in all of poker that people just don't understand. Raising over limpers. In the kiss ranges, I recommend a 7.2% raise over a limper's range from the blinds. But don't use this range blindly. Be judicious based on the number and types of limpers. Stay out of trouble and look to build the pot with stronger hands versus players that you're comfortable playing out of position with. Your opponent's limped in after all, which makes it likely they'll call your raise. Every raise must have a purpose, so what's your purpose for raising here in the small blind or big blind versus limpers? Answering this question every time you're in the blinds will lead to much better, more reasoned play. You can raise more frequently versus one limper than when facing multiple limpers. You can consider it an isolation raise, and you're planning on taking advantage of the limper's post-flop weaknesses. Size your raises at 4x plus 1 per limper or even higher as necessary. You don't want to see the flop with any hand out of position versus 5 other players, so find the pain threshold and bet accordingly to limit the players involved to 1 or 2. When considering the sizing, gauge how often you think the next to act will call. If they call, this sweetens the pot for all the other limpers. If you're making it a good size to get the next player to fold, your raise has a high likelihood of limiting the players in the pot. Know what you'll do versus a 3-bet from any of the limpers or from the big blind. Review their limp then raise and limp then call stats to give you a good idea of what to expect and what to make of any raises. Statistics to track this week. Track your VPIP and PFR in each blind, also your total win rate in the blinds, and your win rate when you VPIP'd in the blinds. Also, your attempt to steal in the small blind, and your fold to steal in each blind. And track your 3-bet steal in each blind as well. Lastly, I want you to run 9 different filters to find some potential blind leaks. Record the number of hands from each of these filters and the win rate associated with each. Number 1, any limp made. Number 2, 2-betting preflop. Number 3, 2-bet calling. Number 4, 3-betting preflop. Number 5, 3-bet stealing. Number 6, 3-bet calling. Number 7, 4-betting. Number 8, 4-bet calling. And the 9th scenario to filter for, 5-betting. Play with purpose number 1. In your sessions this week, focus intently on your play in the blinds. Before calling, raising, or betting, look at your opponent's related stats. Know the intent of your play before you make it. Are you betting or raising for value or as a bluff? Are you calling with a value hand better than your opponent's opening range, a post-flop playable hand, or a plan to bluff later? Are you folding because calling and 3-betting are both negative EV? Play with purpose number 2. Develop a 3-bet steal mentality in 2 30-minute focus sessions this week. For every 2-bet you face in the blinds, don't auto-click fold. Instead, ask yourself, is a 3-bet steal profitable here? If the answer is yes, pull the trigger regardless of the hand you hold, although your hand might make it more profitable due to blockers or post-flop playability. If the answer is no, what hand could you hold or what other raising opponent at the table would make the steal profitable? Play with purpose number 3. In 2 more 30-minute focus sessions, consciously work on the leak you discovered in the second study with purpose, which I'll cover in a moment. Study with purpose number 1. Related to the eye-opening exercise at the beginning of the chapter, run the second filter for any call preflop in the blinds. Now, using PokerTracker 4, switch from the summary report to the Hold'em hand range visualizer report. And Hold'em Manager 2 has a similar heat map function. Make sure you select voluntarily put money in the pot as the heat map statistic. This will show you every hand you called within the blinds. You can see what this looks like in Figure 106 on the Images page. Click on and then review any hands that stand out as potentially bad calls. In Figure 106, you see hands highlighted like 5-deuce offsuit, 5-4 offsuit, 6-4 offsuit, Queen-3 offsuit, and King-3 offsuit. As you review the hands, determine if your call was positive or negative EV. Find mistakes made, record them in your journal, and resolve to not repeat them. Study with purpose number 2. Record the numbers for all 9 of the potential blind leaks from the Statistics to Track section. Dive into the one that seems most dire. Figure out what you're doing wrong and how you can work to plug this leak. Are you being too aggressive versus the wrong opponent? Are you calling with too many pretty hands in hopes of hitting the flop? Are you not looking at your opponent's stats before you make your play? And study with purpose number 3. See if you have the leak of set mining too often. Run the following filter. You post to the small or the big blind. Any call pre-flop, holding pocket 8s through pocket deuces. If your win rate is positive, you're making good set mining decisions. If it's negative, you're potentially set mining in bad spots, or you won't give up post-flop because you hit a draw, or you are an unbelieving calling station. Go through your biggest losing hands and figure out where the issue lies. Make sure you're utilizing the 20x rule for set mining. Subdomino 4.2 Post-Flop Blind Defense. This subdomino will simplify post-flop play from the blinds. This is the only subdomino in the book dedicated to post-flop play. And there's a good reason for it. Many of your blind V-pipping decisions are centered around purposefully getting to the flop. Whether calling in either blind or checking the big blind, you know you're going to see a flop. When V-pipping in the blinds, you get involved in 2 common situations: multi-way and out of position, or heads up and out of position. Occasionally, you're in the big blind with position versus the small blind, but I'll cover that in the next subdomino. As I discuss out of position post-flop play from the blinds, I'll work under the assumption that you didn't randomly click call or raise pre-flop. You knew what you were getting yourself into. Multi-way and out of position. Multi-way pots are any hand that gets to the flop with 3 or more players. A general approach. It's important to play solid post-flop poker due to the multiple opponents or landmines in these post-flop battles. You must make good decisions with your reads, stats, and player tendencies to back up your plays. We have one thing in our favor: good pre-flop hand selection. Your fishy and laggy opponents make poker more difficult on themselves by playing far too many hands out of the blinds. You choose ranges that contain pocket pairs, suited connectors, suited aces, both big and small, and suited broadways. This gives you a great chance to hit value hands and good draws on the flop, so your ranges have high playability. The Kiss big blind calling range versus a cutoff open raise hits the flop with top pair or greater, and open-ended straight draws or greater 30.3% of the time. And you can see this with figure 107 on the images page. Regardless of how well you hit the flop, there are 4 things you must keep in mind before acting on your hand. Number 1, the players involved. The more stationy they are, the less likely your bluffs will work, but the more value you can extract. The opposite holds true when facing nitty opponents. Maniacs and lags can spew chips, which is great for you, but watch out for winning regs. These players are hard to extract value from, and hard to bluff as well. They don't put in loads of chips without a strong hand or a great opportunity to bluff. The second thing to keep in mind in multi-way pots, top pair doesn't hold the same strength. If you face significant post-flop action with a top pair hand, it's often likely you're beat, or your opponents have great draws they won't fold. Be ready to ditch good hands like top pair when you face significant multi-way post-flop action. Knowing the player types you're up against is crucial in spotting instances where it's imperative you fold your top pair hand. If a calling station whale raises all in on a 10-9-8 flop, your ace-10 is no good here. The third item to keep in mind in multi-way pots: don't fight for the chips you've already invested into the pot. That money's no longer yours. It's generally okay to play fit or fold on the flop when you're out of position versus many players. Don't throw good money at bad situations, and remember that folding is neutral EV, whereas fighting for the pot with bets and raises can easily be negative EV. And the fourth thing to keep in mind for multi-way pots: know how your hand can earn chips. If you don't know how you're going to win the pot, either bluffing or winning at showdown, ditch the hand early and get out cheaply. If you're flummoxed, don't flounder, just fold. Flopping a value hand in multi-way pots. When you flop a strong multi-way hand, like 2 pair or greater, you must first answer the question, how am I going to earn the most chips here? Being a multi-way pot, there were at least 2 pre-flop callers. These are your most likely value targets, as they've already shown a propensity to call. Gauge how often they'll call based on their fold to c-bet stat. You may not have the betting lead, but fold to c-bet gives you a great idea of their street-by-street honesty versus bets. The lower the percentage, sub 40% is great. The more they'll likely give you value when you're looking for it. The other player you want to consider gaining value from is the pre-flop raiser, if it wasn't you. The raiser will be critical in your decision, as they've got the incentive and the initiative to c-bet either for value or as a bluff. Here's an example scenario: playing a flopped flush. Hero is in the big blind with queen of spades, jack of spades. A tight aggressive villain is under the gun with a 60 big blind stack, and min opens the pot. Stats are 18-11 with a tiny 7% raise first in early position. A whale calls in the cutoff, and it's folded to Hero, who calls the additional big blind. The flop comes 9 of spades, 7 of spades, 6 of spades. Hero flops the third nut flush in a 6 big blind pot and is first to act in front of 2 players. What's the best play considering the opponents who have position on Hero? Check raise. Monotone boards are scary, and even more so when somebody donk leads against multiple players. Hero could donk lead with a value bet, but that will scare away many hands that could bluff or make a weaker value bet at this pot. Once Hero checks, the tight aggressive villain with a tiny early position range will likely fire big bets on this scary board with their overpairs and possibly overcards, especially if they contain a spade. For example, pocket aces with a spade, ace-king with the ace of spades, pocket kings with the king of spades, and so on. The whale in the cutoff can easily come along, especially with some spade draw of their own, or even a flopped set, 2 pair, or a flush. This is a great opportunity for Hero to build the pot by check-raising their incredibly strong hand. You can't always rely on people to bet in multi-way pots though. The prior scenario was perfect for a check-raise due to the ultra-tight under-the-gun villain, with a strong range and wanting to charge any draws on this wet flop. But what if both opponents were calling stations? This would have been a great opportunity to bet and get calls from every random ace or king of spades they may be holding. And the maniacs? They may see this scary board as their opportunity to blow this weak donk better out of the pot with a bluff raise. With the board so middle card heavy, it makes for plenty of sets, two pair, and even straights to get value from before a fourth spade hits the board. If your opponents are willing to pay, bet for maximum value. But before you go off and fire 3 barrels for value, consider what your opponent could possibly have on every street that would be willing to commit so many chips. If they raise, are they doing so with worse? If they c-bet certain sizings, are they doing so as bluffs? If they're calling you down, could they be calling and not raising with a hand that actually beats you? You must put your hand reading skills to use to determine if your value hand is still above their likely range, or if their actions spell a stronger hand than yours. Flopping a marginal hand or draw in multi-way pots. Don't be the type of player you're looking to extract value from. You gain the most value from those willing to call down with top pair weak kicker and overpay for their draws. Don't allow yourself to get swept up in a fish's hopeful mindset. Your options on the flop are to check fold, check call, check raise, or donk lead. Check fold marginal hands and draws. There's no shame in check folding your complete whiffs, like jack of clubs, 10 of clubs, on the ace of spades, 4 of hearts, deuce of hearts board. Having a default folding range like this is completely okay in multi-way pots. But as a good exercise, ask yourself, how can I win this pot? Considering other plays before you click fold, not just the obvious money makers and money savers, is how you'll develop yourself into a great player. And occasionally, you'll hit upon a positive EV way to steal the pot. You can ask yourself questions like, will a check raise work to take down this pot? If I check and they check behind, how likely are they to fold to my turn probe bet? Or, can I rep a strong hand by check calling here, then leading out on the turn? What strong hands on the flop could I rep with this type of play? Check call with favorable outs and odds math. Check calls are passive plays and they don't have the benefit of fold equity. Because of this, they're often negative EV plays, which is why value betting versus stations and whales is so profitable. Check calls passively help to build the pot for a nice profitable score for the aggressor. Calling one street can easily lead to more calls on future streets, or even folds when the pressure your opponent exerts is too high. If you're considering a check call on any street, ensure that the math is in your favor. If your marginal hand, like top pair weak kicker or second pair, is facing a half pot bet, it needs to win at showdown or be able to win the pot before showdown at least 25% of the time. If you believe this to be true, then make the call. But be ready for future bets and potentially bigger bet sizings. Draws are not always worth the cost of seeing the next street. Figure 108 is an outs and odds chart that shows how likely you'll hit your draw on the next street. So on the turn when facing a flop decision, and on the river when facing a turn decision. This figure shows you the exact odds of hitting your outs on the next street, but it also shows you the shortcut times 2 rule. So for example, if you have the gut shot for 4 outs, you actually have 9% chance of hitting on the next street. Utilizing the times 2 rule, it gives you 8%, which is very close to that 9%. So you don't have to memorize the exact odds of hitting, just use the shortcut times 2 rule. To use this chart, compare the odds of hitting your draw with the price you're being offered. For example, Hero has jack of spades, 10 of spades, on an ace of spades, 9 of clubs, 8 of spades board. Hero has a flush draw and an open-ended straight draw. Hero checks in hopes of a free turn card. Villain c-bets 6 big blinds into the 8 big blind pot. Hero must call 6 big blinds to win a total pot of 20, so Hero needs 30% equity to call. At 15 outs, figure 108 shows you that Hero has 32% equity in the hand, and using the times 2 rule, it actually estimates it at 30%. Hero can make a mathematically correct call, but also knows that if the turn doesn't complete the draw, Villain may bet again, and this can become a costly drawing opportunity. If Hero had anything less than 14 outs, it would be a mathematically incorrect call. If the price you're being offered is right to call with the ×2 rule in mind, or if you're able to check and see a free turn card, then great! But don't stick around and overpay in the hopes that you might hit your gut shot or that your Jack-8 is good on a Jack-Deuce-3 board. If you're contemplating an all-in call on the flop, you can use the ×4 rule. The odds of hitting your flop draw by the river are 4 times the outs. So a 9-out flush draw on the flop has 2 streets to hit the flush on the turn and the river. So that's a 36% chance, or 9 times 4. Check raise. Check raising with a marginal hand or draw is a great way to take the pot down against frequent in-position c-betters. Min check raises often work, but your loose-aggressive and maniac opponents might see this as their opportunity to min 3-bet re-bluff you. Make your check raises somewhere between 2x and 2.5x and try to hit your opponent's pain threshold. Not all flops are equal, and not all hands are worth check raising. It's more favorable to check raise hands with lots of outs, thus adding to your fold equity with drawing equity. Here's an example scenario, knowing what cards add equity on the turn. Hero called preflop and is considering a check raise bluff with a marginal hand with a backdoor flush draw and backdoor straight draw. Hero has 8 of spades, 7 of spades. The board? King of spades, 9 of diamonds, 7 of hearts. What turn cards either give Hero showdown value or add drawing equity? Any 8 or 7 gives Hero 2 pair or greater. Any Jack, 10, 6, 5, or spade will add a gut shot, an open-ended straight draw, or a flush draw to Hero's hand. Don't go overboard with your check raise bluffs. It's a profitable play, but doing it too often will convince your opponents you love bluffing with it. You can find the same tendency in your opponents. Look for a check raise greater than 10% of the time over a big sample, like 50 or more opportunities. You flop a hand worth bloating the pot 10% of the time or less, so if your opponent check raises greater than this, they use it as a bluff. If you choose a check raise bluff, the sooner the better. If you check call the flop with a plan to check raise the turn, you're risking many more chips. For example, using the prior situation, Hero could bluff check raise the 6 big blind bet to 15 big blinds at 2.5x sizing. This bet needs to work 52% of the time to break even, which is 15 divided by the 29 big blind total pot. The check raise has fold equity because it's such a strong looking play, and being a bluff, if villain calls, Hero can hit on the turn and now bet for value, or Hero can keep up the pressure and double barrel bluff the turn. On the other hand, if Hero calls the flop bet of 6 big blinds, their turn pot size will be 20 big blinds. When villain makes another 3/4 pot sized bet at 15 big blinds, it'll cost Hero 37.5 big blinds to bluff check raise. This needs to work the same 52% of the time to break even, but it's much more costly, and there's only one card to come to help Hero hit his draw. If you make the check raise, but the opponent calls and the turn card doesn't help you, then don't feel obligated to double barrel bluff. Your opponent's decision to call changes this from a profitable check raise bluffing opportunity into a money-losing situation. Save your chips and use them to pull another one of these in the future. The donk bet. Donk betting is another multi-way pot bluffing action, but this play looks very weak, especially when it's made for only 1 or 2 big blinds. If you're going to donk bluff at the pot, size it bigger to at least 2/3 pot, and even larger works better. Break-even points for donk bet sizings: 1/4 pot needs to work 20% of the time. 1/3 pot needs to work 25%, half pot 33%, 2/3 pot 40%, 3/4 pot 43%, full pot 50%, and 2 times the pot 67%. In multi-way pots, the bigger the donk lead, the more it screams protection. It's like you flopped a strong hand, but you're scared of one of your multiple opponents drawing out on you. If the board is wet and somebody calls, expect them to have the draw. Before you donk lead, gauge how well the board hits the preflop raiser's range. Donking into an ace or king high flop as the caller from the blinds looks very suspicious. Choose boards that miss the Broadway heavy ranges that open raisers have. 7-4-3 and 9-6-5 are great boards to donk bluff at. If you have a big sample on your opponent, like 500 or more hands, look at their fold to donk bet stat first. The higher the better, and you can compare it to the break-even percentages above to gauge the most profitable sizing. The opponent caps their range when they call your donk lead. If they had a good hand, they would raise you for value. So the call indicates some sort of draw, underpair, or weak top pair hand. You can fire a second barrel on turn cards that don't help their range. Beware also that with other preflop callers involved, they have ranges that hit baby and middle card heavy boards just as often as yours can. If you're facing stations who never fold on the flop, your donk lead will work far less often than you'd like it to. Now heads up and out of position. Here's the general approach. Dealing with only one opponent in a heads-up play allows for easier decision making. Before you make your move, consider the following. Number 1. The player you face. Stations won't fold but give plenty of value, and nits are the opposite. The lags and tags can take a little more work, but use their stats against them and go with aggressive plays and sizing that make their decisions difficult. Number 2. Top pair hands are much stronger versus one opponent. Don't be too quick to throw away top pair weak kicker hands. Think about your opponent's range, how well it interacts with the board, and what their bet sizing represents before you ditch any showdown-worthy hands. Number 3. Don't feel the need to fight for your preflop chips in the pot. That money's no longer yours, so it's okay to ditch the hand if the situation is unfavorable. But when you're heads up, bluffs are easier to pull off. Plan them according to the tendencies of your opponent, and if you think they won't fold to a bluff, no matter how big, then don't bluff. And the fourth consideration. Continue to ask the question, how can I make money here? Again, if you don't know how you're going to earn the pot, ditch the hand. Flopping a value hand in heads-up pots. When you flop a valuable made hand, like 2 pair or greater, you generally don't want to check raise. This gives your opponent the opportunity to easily ditch their extremely wide bluff c-betting range. If you're up against a double barreler, check call instead, then check the turn with intent to check raise. If villain checks behind on the turn, that's okay. It's not ideal, but you can still bet the river for some value. If your opponent is a station, go for max value by leading out on the flop, then again on favorable turns and rivers. Calling stations are unbelieving by nature, so you've got to bet to gain value from them. Bet at least half pot, then increase or decrease the sizing on future streets based on how likely you think the opponent will call. If your opponent is a post-flop aggressive maniac, like they make many bets, raises, and check raises, throw out the half-pot donk bet and hope for a raise. If it's a min raise, call and lead out again on the turn. But if it's sized at 2.5x or more, then make the flop 3-bet with the intent to get stacks in. Keep firing until you take their stack or they fold. If you're up against a nit, just check and hope they bet, which you intend to call. Do not scare away foldy players on good flops with large bets or raises. Don't make their decisions easy. Flopping a marginal hand or draw in heads-up pots. Now that you're up against only one player, your flop options remain the same as in multi-way pots. All of the same ideas still apply, but your chosen bluff play has a slightly better chance of success due to the heads-up nature of the hand. Think about your opponent's preflop range and how well it interacts with the flop before you try one of these bluffs. A preflop calling range is different than a preflop opener's range, which is also different from a preflop 3-better's range, and they all interact differently with the board. I went into great detail on your bluffing options in the prior section, so I'm going to cover one special play here that can work well against only one player, the flop out of position float. Here's how the play works. You check call on the flop on boards that hit your range. Time down a little bit before you call to make it appear that you're thinking about raising. On the turn, time down then check. Hopefully villain checks behind. On a river card that doesn't help villain's range, waste no time in donk leading. You want this bet to look like you were hoping to check raise on the turn, but you missed your chance, so now the only way to get value is to bet out. This play is extremely valuable against turn-honest players who have a high fold to river bet stat. If you find someone whose flop c-bet drops from 70 to 30% on the turn, with a high fold to river bet at 60% or greater, these are perfect to target here. 5 post-flop leaks in the blinds. Utilize these 5 leak finding filters in your poker tracking software to see where you must focus your studies. Work to plug the most costly leak first, either by the number of occurrences or money lost, or the most negative win rate over a big sample. Leak number 1. Losing when out of position in multi-way pots. Here are the filter details. Hero posted either blind, not in position on the flop. Players seeing the flop between 3 and 10. This filter shows how profitable you are when playing out of position in multi-way flops. If this is anything positive, that's great. It could mean a few different things. You're getting here with strong hands and you're playing well by extracting value. It could mean you're considering your opponents and the board and you're making successful bluffs. It could mean that you're ditching all but your strong hands and strongest draws and only staying in when it's positive EV to do so. If your win rate is negative, it means that one or more of the three things just mentioned are going against you. Here are 2 steps to help fix this leak. Step 1. Grasp the negative EV nature of the situation. Ask yourself one simple question before every pre-flop decision in the blinds. How can I make money with this hand in this position against these players? If you can't think of a way to make money other than hitting a miracle flop, then you can't fold this hand fast enough. Step number 2. Don't continue with your weakest hands and draws. Don't feel committed even with top pair weak kicker hands or those low flush draws and weak straight draws. Many players don't want to give up marginal hands and they give too much value to their opponents by calling too wide or pushing their bluffs too hard. If it doesn't look profitable, just fold. Leak number 2. Losing when out of position in heads-up pots. Filter details. Hero posted either blind, out of position on the flop, players seeing the flop between 2 and 2. This filter shows your profitability when heads up and out of position. Again, if it's positive, great! But take a look at your biggest losing hands and see if there are some things you could have done better. There are 2 common causes for a negative win rate. Number 1, you don't like to give up post-flop versus only one other player. Some players feel that folding on the flop to a single bet versus one villain means you're letting opponents walk all over you. This isn't the case at all, as long as you're folding when it makes sense to do so. And the second common cause for this negative win rate? You're too aggressive with your marginal hands and draws. We've all been there on the flop, bluff raising and donk leading with weak draws and hands, hoping for a fold. But your opponent shows interest by calling. You don't consider what their call means on this board with their range, so you auto double barrel bluff on any turn card. This is spewing chips without a compelling reason. Review the losing hands that come through this filter and consider how you could have made better EV decisions. Did you consider all of your options before you made your decisions? Like check fold, check call, check raise, or donk bet? Did you think about the hands that your opponent called your flop bet with? Once they called, how does the turn card help or hinder their range? Leak number 3. Losing when calling on the flop. Here are the filter details. Hero posted either blind, made any call on the flop. This filter will show if you're making good flop calls. A negative win rate can be fixed. Review all of your losing hands. Yes, all. You might be surprised to see how many small 8 to 12 big blind pots you've lost. This may sound inconsequential, but losing lots of these smallish pots equals one big hit to your win rate. You need to see what types of marginal hands and weak draws you're calling with. Take note of the mistakes that repeat themselves, and commit to not making them again. Sort the hands returned in the filter by card strength. See how often you're playing offsuit broadways, weak aces, offsuit hands, and crappy suited cards. These can all be troublesome starting hands. If you're calling preflop with a lot of ace-6 offsuit, 9-8 offsuit, king-10 offsuit, jack-7 suited, or king-8 suited hands, then you've got to tighten up preflop to make for better post-flop decisions. You're going to be out of position, so choose hands that flop well and are easy to play. Leak number 4. Losing when check raising on the flop. Here are the filter details. Hero posted either blind, out of position on the flop. First flop action was to check, and second flop action was raise. A negative win rate here is fixable. First, look at your overall check raise flop statistic. Are you making this play greater than 10% of the time? If so, your opponents may not be giving you credit for a strong hand. Review all of your losing hands. What are you doing wrong? Are your value check raises getting sucked out on? Maybe you need to raise more to charge the draws and weaker hands. Are they calling every one of your bluffs? Maybe you're missing indications that they will never fold on this flop. Figure out what you're doing wrong and resolve to fix it. And the 5th leak out of the blinds. Losing when donk betting. Here are the filter details. Hero posted either blind, donk bet on the flop. Review all of your losing hands. Are you choosing bad spots? Are you donk leading with enough backdoor draws that could allow for the second barrel? Are you a one-and-done donk better? Are your donk bets so small that you're not hitting their pain threshold? Figure out your mistakes and resolve to fix them. Statistics to track this week. Track your small blind and big blind win rates separately. Track your PFR and VPIP in the blinds separately. Track your check raise flop statistic, total and by position. Track your donk bet on the flop as a total and by position. Track your check raise on the flop in the blinds and the win rate associated with it. Also track your check call on the flop in the blinds and the win rate associated. Also track your donk bet on the flop in the blinds and the win rate associated with it. Play with purpose number 1. Are you paying attention? In your next 3 play sessions, use a tick sheet to count how many times you call or raise out of the blinds. After your session, run a filter for any call and another for any raise in the blinds pre-flop. Your goal is for the number on the tick sheet to match the number of actual times you made that play. You want to stay present and aware of all your decisions, and be cognizant of the situations you're voluntarily getting yourself into. Play with purpose number 2. In 3 30-minute focus sessions this week, pay attention to every blind hand that sees the flop. Before you make your play, consider all your options and go with the one that seems most positive EV to you, whether that's to donk bet, check call, check raise, or check fold. Tag any questionable hands with a review tag so you can review each one in your next study session to figure out the most positive EV option. Study with purpose number 1. Run each of the 5 leak finding filters and record the win rates and number of instances for each. Tackle the most costly leak through your study sessions this week. Review most of the losing hands and try to figure out what you're doing wrong. Are your preflop hand selections good? Are you taking into account the opponent, their range, the strength of their hand, and how you can likely make money in this spot? Are you taking into account all the information available to you to make solid post-flop choices? Resolve to focus on this leak with each session you play, and review any applicable hands the following day to determine if you're making good decisions. Study with purpose number 2. Try to learn from the good and bad check raises your winning opponents make. Run an all players report in your poker tracking software, and look for players with a positive win rate and a greater than 10% check raise flop statistic. I built my report with the check raise flop statistic displayed and added expression filters for hands greater than 1,000 and big blind per 100 hands win rate greater than 0. You can see an example of my report as figure 109 on the images page. Next, review 5 of these players and filter for their check raising hands out of the blinds. Do they have a positive win rate when check raising? What sizing do they use? Do they target specific player types? If any hands went to showdown, what hand strengths are they check raising with? And study with purpose number 3. Learn from your opponent's donk betting hands. Add the donk flop statistic to the same report as you just made in number 2 and sort it by that stat. Again, review 5 of these winning players and filter for their donk betting hands. Analyze the good and bad donk betting decisions they're making. Learn as much as you can from any showdown hands and try to figure out the parameters they use for donk betting. Maybe good draws, made hands, overcards, complete bluffs, etc. Subdomino 4.3. Blind versus blind situations. Blind versus blind situations come up frequently, especially in 6-max games. There are pros and cons to each side of the blind versus blind coin. Pro: the small blind has seen the rest of the table fold and has the opportunity to come in for a quick steal. Con: if called, small blind plays out of position post-flop. Pro: the small blind can choose to fold quite often and lose 1/2 big blind, not allowing the big blind to exploit their post-flop position. Con: giving up this way too often leads to missing easy money-making opportunities versus foldy big blinds. Pro: the big blind can benefit from the wide small blind stealing range and call with a tight value range and play post-flop in position. Pro: the big blind can 3-bet frequently to earn a lot of folds from the wide small blind open raising range. Con: the big blind loses chips by 3-betting too wide, then folding to an aggressive small blind's 4-bet. Ultimate pro for the big blind: gets to act in position both pre and post flop. Whichever side of the blind versus blind coin you're on, there are 3 considerations you must take into account before you make your play. The 3 considerations for blind versus blind play. Consideration number 1. Follow your ranges. In the small blind, without any information on your fellow blind player, when it's your turn to act, follow the KISS ranges I outlined. These were designed to keep the game simple in these challenging, guaranteed out-of-position situations. As you learn more about your fellow blind player, you can easily deviate from the ranges to maximize EV. Against the right big blind player, the small blind can profitably steal any 2 cards. For the most part, though, sticking to the 20% small blind opening range will limit your exposure to unfavorable calls and more unfavorable 3-bets from the big blind. If the big blind gives up the goose too easily, increase your stealing range to the 31% button range, and then increase it even further if your opponent is still offering up no defense. When the big blind starts to fight back with either calls or 3-bets, reassess and tighten up so you're not opening and then folding too often. You also want to limit the opportunities that your big blind opponent can simply call to see the flop with position on you. When you face 3-bets, the 3-bet versus small blind statistic from the big blind will be your best friend. If it's high, like greater than 8% and definitely over 10%, you've found a 3-bet bluffer, so you can adjust by narrowing your small blind opening range. This allows you to defend with calls and 4-bets more frequently. You can also adjust by sizing your open raises to 3.5 big blinds or a little bit greater to discourage those 3-bets. And you can also adjust by 4-bet bluffing if you know your opponent can find the fold button. If they don't fold, don't bluff. Now, in the big blind, sometimes your small blind opponent will open limp instead of raising. When this happens, raise with your entire big blind raising range. Small blind open limps are incredibly weak, and it's their way of saying, "Please, Mr. Big Blind, may I see a cheap flop?" Your answer? No, Timmy, it's gonna cost you. If your opponent has a high limp then fold stat at greater than 50%, size your bets smaller to make bluffs less costly and your value bets more likely to get called. If they love to limp then call at greater than 50%, use variable sizing. Go smaller with your bluffs and bigger with your value hands. Frequent limpers probably won't notice how you telegraph your hand strength when they limp. They want to see a flop, so charge them accordingly to do so. An important reason for raising over limpers is that it gives you initiative and allows you to c-bet on the flop. When you check behind and then bet the flop, it's less believable that you've got a hand. Raising preflop gives the idea that you could have a monster, and your c-bet is more likely to be believed. Here's an example scenario. The big blind raising over a fishy small blind open limp. The whale in the small blind at 45-12 open limps with a limp then call stat at 55% and has a fold to flop c-bet of 60%. Hero looks down to see 10-8 suited in the big blind, a great hand to see flops with, especially with position. What's the best option for Hero? Check behind or raise? Raise to between 2 and 3 big blinds. This raise puts more aces, kings, and queens, along with pocket pairs, within Hero's range, so bluff c-bets will be more believable on ace, king, and queen high boards. The stronger perceived range gives Hero another post-flop advantage. When facing a small blind open raise instead, the KISS ranges has you defending almost 20% of the time, with calls and 3-bets. The reason for this large 2-bet defense range is you have ultimate position, and many opponents have a very large small blind open raising range, sometimes greater than 50%. This makes it very difficult for them to defend versus 3-bets, and difficult as well to go post-flop with their wide range. The second consideration for blind versus blind play. Know the opponent. What type of player are you up against? Do they fold a lot? Maybe 3-bet a lot? Or call way too often? How about post-flop? Do they fold to c-bets? Are they turn honest? Or are they a station capable of calling down with third pair? The more you know about your opponent, the better. Sometimes you're playing against an unknown. If that's the case, play aggressively, but stick to your ranges, until you develop an understanding of how they play. Then adjust accordingly. Try to develop a read on your opponent's post-flop tendencies as well. If you're not involved in a hand with them, watch as they play and take note of their actions. Utilize your knowledge and visualize how post-flop will play out before you raise or call pre-flop. If they hate folding post-flop, then go for value only. If they readily fold, then you can pull off some good bluffs. The more often they fold post-flop, the more you want to get into bloated pots with them, especially in position. Utilizing stats from your HUD is critical in every decision made. There are 5 HUD stats that will teach you loads about your fellow opponent in the blinds. Number 1. Big blind fold versus small blind steal. The higher the better, and anything over 75% deserves to be exploited with steal after steal until they fight back. But if they fold a lot and you've got a premium hand, you may want to size your raise smaller to elicit action from them. The second stat, attempt to steal. This stat helps to judge the strength of the small blind's open raise. Anything over 30% deserves at least the consideration of a 3-bet re-steal or a call. But before you 3-bet re-steal, make sure you also look at their raise, then fold in the small blind stat. Number 3. 3-bet versus small blind 2-bet. This is part of the 3-bet versus position stats that I discussed back in Subdomino 3.4. This shows you how likely the big blind will 3-bet over your small blind raise. Anything over 8% is a player who loves to re-steal. Be careful and expect a 3-bet before opening against them. The fourth stat, fold to flop and turn c-bet. You are raising pre-flop, so look at these stats before you do so. See what street they get honest on to prepare yourself for barrel bluffing if necessary. Also, see how often they fold in position versus out of position, as this could play a significant factor. And the fifth statistic, c-bet flop and turn. These help to know how likely you'll be facing bets and barrels post-flop. And it can save you necessary pre-flop calling chips if things are looking to get ugly post-flop. The third consideration for blind versus blind play. Prepare for villain's reaction. This is critical. You must think ahead to how your opponent will respond to your action. If you open raise from the small blind, it benefits you to have an idea of how you'll respond to a re-raise or how you'll approach post-flop play if the big blind calls. If you're in the big blind and raise over the small blind limp, it benefits you to have an idea of how you'll approach the flop in position if they call, or how you'll respond to your opponent's pre-flop limp re-raise. Knowing your options and being prepared for your opponent's reaction keeps you from getting surprised. I can't remember where I learned this, but there's an adage I've always liked. If you're surprised by how your opponent responds, then you didn't give it enough thought. Now act! You've taken into account the 3 considerations above, and you've chosen the most positive EV route. Now your job is to act on it. Here's an example scenario. To call a 3-bet with King 10 suited. It's folded to hero with King 10 suited in the small blind, who opens to 3 big blinds with intent to fold to a 3-bet. Villain has a small value-oriented 3-bet of 2% in the big blind. Villain's c-bet in 3-bet or greater pots is at 85%. Villain thinks, then makes a min 3-bet to 5 big blinds. Hero had intended to fold, but now only has to call 2 big blinds to win a total pot of 10 big blinds. Hero only needs 20% pre-flop equity to mathematically make a correct call, and King 10 suited has 26% equity versus a small 2% 3-bet range. Is the most positive EV route to call the 3-bet? No, a neutral EV fold is the most positive EV route. Just because heroes now getting the requisite odds doesn't mean they must change their plan from raise then folding pre-flop. Look at the facts. First, calling will put hero out of position with the capped range on the flop. Next, villain's 3-bet range is queens or greater and ace-king. These hands are not giving up post-flop easily. Also, hero can expect c-bets most of the time. Next, King 10 suited can only go for value with trip 10s, straights, and flushes. And in total, this occurs less than 3% of the time. And you can see that in figure 110 on the images page. Lastly, King 10 suited can hit some draws, but that will mean calling or getting aggressive with a villain who is likely to bet many streets. So there's no shame in following your original intent to raise then fold when your opponent is telling you they've got the goods, and the only way to beat them is by hitting a miracle flop. That original steal was logically deduced and rightly executed. Your opponent just put the kibosh on it because they were dealt a very strong hand, and folding is the correct response. Remember, the button is only a fold away. Statistics to track this week. Track your win rate when you saw the flop in the blinds, both of them individually. Also track your limp in the small blind as a percentage and your win rate when doing so. Track your win rate when you checked in the big blind. Track your win rate when you raised over limpers in the big blind. Track your steal in the small blind percentage, and your win rate when doing so. Also track your big blind fold to small blind steal percentage. Track the 3-bet steal in the big blind as a percentage and the win rate when you did it. And lastly, track your win rate when in the small blind, raising first in, then calling the 3-bet. Play with purpose number 1. Your warm-up prior to each session this week is to review your notes on this chapter. Focus on every blind versus blind confrontation and strive to put to use what you learned here. Tag every blind versus blind hand that you play this week with a BVB tag so you can review them in your study sessions. Play with purpose number 2. In 3 30-minute focus sessions of 1 to 2 tables, examine the stats from each of your opponents and complete this list of 6 questions on a piece of paper. Question 1. Who folds their blinds the most to steals? Second most? Question 2. Who overdefends their blinds with calls? Second most? Question 3. Who 3-bet steals the most? Question 4. Who is the tightest preflop player? Question 5. Who's the most foldy post-flop player? And question 6. Who is your number 1 value target? Study with purpose number 1. Related to the first play with purpose above, study each of these tagged hands in your next day's study session. What's your total win rate in blind versus blind confrontations? Did you make good steal or 3-bet steals? Did you stick with your ranges or stray outside them? Were your calls positive EV based on hand strength, opponent, and their likely reaction? How can you improve your blind versus blind play? Study with purpose number 2. Filter for blind play along with specific hand categories. Look at your entire year, or at least 30,000 hands, so you get a good sample with which to judge the profitability of these hands. Here are the filter details. You posted either the small blind or the big blind. You also V-pipped. And here are the different hand categories to filter for. Pocket pairs 9s through deuces, suited connectors, Queen Jack suited down through 3 deuce suited, suited gappers, King Jack suited to 4 deuce suited, suited aces, Ace 9 suited down through Ace deuce suited, offsuit aces, Ace 9 off through Ace deuce off, suited broadways like Ace Jack suited through Ace 10 suited, King Jack suited through King 10 suited, Queen Jack suited through Queen 10 suited, and Jack 10 suited. Offsuit broadways, so the same hands as just mentioned, but the offsuit variety. Record your dollars won, the win rates, and the number of hands played for each of these filters. Next, break up the hand categories into weaker and stronger groups. For example, run the filter for suited connectors, Queen Jack suited through 9-8 suited, and then for 8-7 suited through 3 deuce suited. Your goal is to find the point where your hand choices go from being profitable to unprofitable. Consider why you play the unprofitable ones and how you can make them profitable. Study with purpose number 3. Learn from your winning opponents who steal and 3-bet steal aggressively. In your poker tracking software, create a new report called Aggressive Winning Stealers. Add the following stats to the report. Big blind per 100 hands win rate, VPIP, PFR, attempt to steal from the small blind, big blind facing a small blind open, and 3-bet. This is also called 3-bet big blind versus small blind. Add expression filters for hands greater than 1,000, big blind per 100 hands win rate greater than 0, and attempt to steal from the small blind greater than 30, and big blind facing a small blind open and 3-bet over 8. You can see an example of this report as figure 111 on the images page. Choose 3 players to review with a high attempt to steal from the small blind, and 3 more players with a high 3-bet big blind versus small blind stat. Individually review their blind play hands. Filter for VPIP and showdown hands and see if you can learn how they are aggressively approaching the blinds. What players are they targeting with their small blind steals and big blind 3-bets? What hands are they showing down, and how do they play them through the streets? Create a small blind raise first in and a big blind 3-bet steal range using their stats and showdown hands. Analyze the profitability of these ranges with your equity calculating software of choice. Conclusion. Thank you for following the poker path I've laid out for you. I trust that you're toppling the dominoes one by one. Action is the greatest teacher, and by completing each of the play with purpose and study with purpose tasks, you've put into action everything you need to improve your preflop game. You've created your own ranges, or simply tweaked the KISS ranges I gave you, and are using them in your games. You've also improved your poker tracking software usage, and you're getting more out of it. Your HUD and statistical understanding is much improved, and you're using this to exploit your opponents better than ever before. You've learned which opponents are best to steal from, and you're also learning how to defend against steals. You've improved your 3-bet and 3-bet defense games, making yourself a more difficult opponent to play against. And you've become a blind versus blind thorn in the side of the players to your direct left and right. I'm sure you've already seen how these preflop improvements are affecting the rest of your game. Now you're ready to work on post-flop skills. In Volume 2, coming out summer of 2018, I'll teach you about continuation betting, post-flop math, the many post-flop plays available to you, and you'll learn more ways to exploit your opponents. There's no end to the dominoes, and it never hurts to go back and re-topple dominoes. Poker's always expanding and changing. It's a dynamic game of adaptation that requires continual study to stay ahead of the competition. It's possible that in a year from now, you'll have to revisit your preflop game with the skills you learn in Volumes 2 and 3. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again in Volume 2.